Hi, this is Community Builders, the podcast where we look for the helpers. I'm here today with Bryce Goldstein, City Council member. Thank you for joining us. Transportation enthusiast as well. I'm really stoked to be talking to you today. Thanks for making the time. Can you tell me how you decided you wanted to run for City Council?
It's kind of a long story, and people have asked me this, and I can't pinpoint it to one thing because there were several. Gosh, where do I start? I don't think that I was one of those kids who wanted to run for president or anything, even if my mom says that I was. But I've been attending city council meetings for so long and have had so many complaints. I've made those known at city council. And then I joined the planning commission in 2019, and I saw that there was a lot of work still to be done. People started asking me if I was going to run for city council because I was on the planning commission. Seems like a maybe logical next step. And I said, oh no, city council would be terrible. Everybody would be mad at me. And the government, just has a lot of room for improvement. And at that time, I didn't see myself as the person to fix a lot of our issues. And then I started seeing a lot of opportunity to become that person. People kept asking me to run. And so I finally did it because my district was up for election last year.
You have some exemplary qualifications for this position. Can you tell me a little bit about your background and what you studied that equipped you for this position?
Sure. Also, I want to say I should probably nail down my why did I run for city council thing one of these days, that I can say it more succinctly.
Yeah. I think that was a good answer. It was like you studied it. I found it really interesting that you said you had been actively attending the city council meetings and filing complaints. Like you were kind of involved before you, just as a concerned community member, before you became an officially involved person.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you asked about my qualifications because that's something that I think I tend to leave out when I talk about why I ran for city council.
Right.
I have a little bit of imposter syndrome, so sometimes I forget that I'm a person who has been on 2 different city commissions and now city council and has a lot of experience in other things. So to kind of go over that, basically, I studied environmental science at Humboldt State University, now Cal Poly Humboldt. I graduated. I accepted a job through AmeriCorps with the city of Chico in 2016 doing climate action plan community engagement mainly and data analysis. So that was a 1-year term, and that gave me a really good glimpse into how our local government functions or not. And one thing that I experienced in that role was because we had a mayor who didn't believe in climate change, my work was kind of stalled. And the city's sustainability task force, if a member left, the mayor wouldn't reappoint anybody new. And so that was really a difficult situation to be in with no power. So after I finished that program, I started working as a transportation planner for a local consulting firm. And a couple of years later, I started working for the state for Caltrans. And now I work on intercity rail planning. Just stalling in what I'm saying. So I've been a transportation planner for about 7 years. I've also worked in a volunteer capacity I also, in my personal life, have participated as a board member for Butte Environmental Council for about 5 years until last year when I decided to run for city council and didn't really have time for that anymore. Was a KZFR programmer on the Peace and Social Justice show for a year, and I served on the city's planning commission and then the climate action commission. So I've been involved in a whole bunch of different things in Chico, as well as playing in bands. So I'm a very busy person, notably. And I saw city council as kind of a way to finally combine a bunch of those interests, such as, being on the board of Butte Environmental Council for so many years. I could take that experience and my involvement in the arts and involvement in showing up to advocate for better policy and kind of combine those as a civic leader. And so I'm still a very busy person, but I get to mesh all of those things.
Nice. How has the experience been on city council? Is it different than you expected? I know you've watched it from the outside for so long, but was there a walking in on your first day realization, or can you tell me a little bit about what it's been like so far?
It's been honestly better than I expected because I had some low expectations. I don't know if that's the way I should phrase it. It's been pretty good, honestly. I feel like our city council has much more of a balance politically than it had last year. And so that's one of the best parts, even though sometimes, there's room for improvement. Like, I brought forward an agenda item on election reform, and we did get it onto the agenda. So we got to discuss it, but then we didn't vote to move forward on it. And that was unfortunate, but I'm glad that we at least got to discuss this item, and perhaps it can come back later before our next redistricting process. So that's just an example of how things are better than they were last year. Last year, our city council was composed of 6 pretty far-right conservatives, and then Addison Winslow, who is a leftist. And so he would agendize something or try to, it wouldn't even get seconded, and he couldn't even put things on the agenda because people viewed him as so politically different that they didn't even want to give him the time of day to discuss his items. And at the city level, we're usually not working on issues that are left versus right. Mm-hmm. We're working on things that benefit everybody.
That's such an important distinction that I really appreciate that perspective. So sorry to interrupt, but yeah, continue.
No, yeah, please do interrupt. And if I'm ever on a huge tangent, you can just interrupt and be like, hey, Bryce, that's not what we're here for.
No, this is exactly what we're here for.
Okay, great. Yeah. It feels like with a little bit more balance on the city council, there's a lot more willingness and perhaps pressure to work together. We have 4 conservatives, 3 progressives right now, and we are finding ourselves, me and Katie Hawley and Addison Winslow, I think we kind of expected that being in the political minority and being seen as these young radical leftists, supposedly, even though it's debatable if I'm young or radical. I think I kind of thought that it might be a little harder to even get the ear of any of the conservative council members, but I've been really happy to get to work a lot with council member Tom Van Overbeck.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah, and he's really interested in improving our downtown through better transportation and planning.
A common ground.
Yeah.
Literally a common ground. I love hearing about that working together stuff. What do you think it was in our community that had an appetite to flip a couple of seats this term? How come it didn't continue with the supermajority?
Well, now I just said that we're working together so well, so I better be careful here. But the reality is that our districts in Chico are drawn in a way to benefit, or at least give the chance of benefiting, a conservative city council. What that looks like is the city of Chico, voter registration-wise, leans Democrat and left. But the way that things keep happening with our voting is not as many Democrats and left independents show up to vote. And the districts got drawn. We have 7 council districts. They get redrawn after every census. So they got redrawn in 2022 by a conservative city council. And so what they did was they gerrymandered it as much as they could, which in Chico, with a progressive majority, it's a little hard to. But what that looked like was gathering up a bunch of suburban areas into a district at the edge of town that's a little more winnable by conservatives, putting all the areas around the college into one district. That's a tactic called packing, where you put voters of one party into a district together so that they're not spread out throughout all the districts. I'm kind of going off the rails into a tangent.
No, I'm very interested in this stuff. I don't know a ton about it, and I'm curious because I'm familiar with gerrymandering and packing, but what is the process of that, and how come in some years you're allowed to redraw the districts, and why is it just by, someone from the conservative side? How come that isn't a more balanced plan when they redraw districts?
Well, first I'm realizing I did the thing where I started getting into the details before telling you the thesis of why I brought it up.
Let's go back.
Okay, so
totally.
Why we flipped 2 seats.
Yeah.
first of all, Katie Hawley and I are very qualified, great candidates. Second, we were in packed districts. The voter registration was heavily in our favor in those 2 districts. And then in the other 2 districts, it was a lot more even, Democrat to Republican. Especially, it was almost 50-50 in District 1 where Mike versus Mike ran. But like I said, a lot of Democrats don't show up to vote. So the vote count ended up being about 55% for Mike O'Brien, the conservative. And in District 3, where Monica McDaniel ran a very good campaign against Dale Bennett, the incumbent, Monica being the liberal, she narrowly lost, unfortunately, even though the voter registration in the district leaned Democrat, but in a way that was still very winnable by conservatives. Whereas in my district, voter registration was about 2-1 Democrat to Republican, and then a lot of independents, and independents are more of a mystery of how they're going to vote or if they're even going to vote. So that was heavily in my favor. But with a similar voter registration in 2020, a Republican won that district. So, it's uncertain whether voter registration will actually lead to outcomes in a supposedly nonpartisan local election, but you can kind of predict it. So I had that advantage, and Katie Hawley's district was the most packed with a lot of college students, professors, and young adults living in higher density areas around the university. And she also was way more qualified than her opponent, so I do want to give her credit.
Awesome. I want to go back to one of the things that you said earlier that really resonated with me, which is that on a local level in government here, fewer of these issues are left versus right issues. This is about let's get bike lanes downtown that everybody agrees on, or let's change things that are just benefit to the community. How do we tell that story better? And I ask that because I think more people would show up to vote if they understood that this isn't a battle royale. This is supposed to be, at least anyway. All of these people on all sides of the spectrum actually want to better the community, who want to do things that are, clear-cut good things. How do we get a little bit more of that knowledge out there?
My first thought is that the voters understand that. The voters are voting for the people that they see as relatable and have good policies. I actually think that it's frequently the candidates who need to learn that they shouldn't be running a campaign that says, I'm progressive, because it's usually those ones who don't win, because what does that mean to a voter? Progressive? You need to say, I'm going to make it safer for you in your community, whether that means as far as crime or safer walking and biking, or, we're going to preserve the environment, tangible things.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to say that I did that perfectly and nobody else did or anything like that, just saying.
Sure.
But that's one of my outcomes of running this campaign, was that voters are less interested usually in what my registration is and more what I'm going to do for my community. But the education component comes in because there were a lot of attack ads against me and my fellow progressive candidates that said things that were just completely untrue. There was that attack ad that went out that had my face next to a pile of needles, and it said something like, Bryce Goldstein wants open air drug markets in the park. Obviously that's not true, and that feels kind of insulting to the voters to think that they're dumb enough to just vote based on that. But we do need more political education.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't know what the local issues are, and maybe all that they're aware of is homelessness issues. And I think we have opportunities, but I'm not quite sure how to implement those for educating people about the other aspects of the city, like transportation and other aspects of community development.
I absolutely want to talk about transportation and community development, but I did want to touch on the housing crisis. And I'm interested in your perspective on that. What is our compassionate but also effective best move for this situation in this community?
Yeah, how many hours do we have here?
What are we seeing now? What are you like optimistic about, and what are you like worried about with how we're handling it?
Are you thinking more homelessness or just general housing?
That's an excellent distinction. Let's talk about, in its like most like base form, I hear the plane. In its most base form, things like the Eaton encampment, things like the camping in the park stuff, the stuff that voters or that community members it's most in their face that they see. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Chico, so I've spent plenty of time walking through downtown in the park, and it certainly has changed and is different. To someone who might be saying like, what's going on and what is the local government doing? What do we say to them?
You can come to City Council, make your voice heard. Obviously, we have a crisis. We have people camping on the plaza. We have so many issues. So we need to do something. And we're under this settlement agreement for the Warren v. Chico lawsuit that basically has prompted the city to open the Genesis pallet shelter, which is one good step towards addressing homelessness. But there are more things we need to do. There are a lot of people who need support and services, whether that's a place where they can shelter or mental health services to be able to get back on their feet. There are a lot of things that we need. And so I want us as a city council to hear from the public. That's where you all can come in and make your voice heard, to say what we've been doing maybe hasn't been working, and if you have ideas for what would. And as a council, we can talk about our priorities based on what we've heard from our constituents and direct staff to ideally work with our local service provider organizations like Safe Space and Chat and Torres Shelter and Jesus Center and North State Shelter Team, to find out what it is that those organizations could use help with, whether that's help accessing grant funds, code changes to remove hurdles to doing things like low barrier sheltering or tiny home villages, or if the city needs to step up and establish its own program. Now, that latter thing, I don't think is as likely. I don't think that we as a city council are going to say, yep, let's just put it in our budget that we're going to spend millions of dollars on opening a new facility. And that's usually not the city's role. It's the service providers who are doing the legwork, and the city should be making sure that we're not getting in their way.
Okay. That's a really interesting point. So first of all, thank you for shouting out all those wonderful organizations. Mm-hmm. I totally agree that they're doing excellent work. What can the city be doing to not get in their way, and how can the rest of the community support?
Well, the first example that comes to mind is I'm a longtime volunteer at Safe Space. For the past year, I've been slacking on that because of running for city council and being on city council. But I have a lot of respect for the work that they do. They partner with churches in our area to shelter people overnight during the coldest winter months. And they've also expanded to doing year-round case management and will often operate cooling shelters in the summer. So the thing with Safe Space is they've always been kind of seen as an underdog organization because they started as just emergency sheltering, kind of a ragtag group of punks and church leaders, kind of an unlikely partnership, but I love it.
Yeah.
And they're low barrier. And low barrier, I think, intimidates some people because what that means is while some organizations will, drug test clients and require you to be in like certain programs, Safe Space is low barrier and says, come into the shelter, we'll put your belongings in storage so that we're not having people bringing in anything they're not allowed to bring in. But, you can sleep here and survive the night. And we're not going to pry into what else is going on in your life as far as sobriety. And they allow pets, which is often an issue for getting into other shelters. And so I really love the work that Safe Space is doing. And why I brought them up is they've had a lot of issues being able to have an intake center or referral center, which is where people can come in and sign up to go to the shelter, because a lot of people are afraid that those people might be, on drugs or something, showing up to sign up for services near their business. So last year we saw Safe Space try to have its intake center downtown at the former 7-Eleven site, and the city told them that that was a non-compliant use. The thing is, there isn't something in the city code that says you can have an intake center for a homeless services organization, because an intake center that is like a pretty specific little thing. We don't really put specific uses like that in our city code. And so it was a gray area of, this isn't quite a homeless shelter because people aren't sleeping at the 7-Eleven. And then this year they moved their services to, or their intake center or referral center to Esplanade. So again, people go there, they sign up, sit in a waiting room, kind of like at a dentist's office or whatever, and then get onto a shuttle and then are shuttled to a church where they stay overnight. The city also had an issue with them using that site. And I'm not certain what the status is of that, but my view is that the city needs to be working with organizations proactively to help figure out where can those services be located? Or if something isn't quite in compliance with the city code, do we change the city code, or do we suggest that something change with that organization? Instead, what's been happening is just code violation letters and fines. Meanwhile, last year, for example, when Safe Space was at the 7-Eleven site downtown, on the same block, we have that building that I get complaints about in my city council email every week, with the big vacant windows, and people call it an eyesore and a blight on downtown at 2nd and Main. Like, we have a lot of issues in our city, and it feels a little bit like sometimes some of them slide under the radar, and politically tense ones, such as homelessness services organizations, get picked on. So I think the city needs to be more proactive in working together with those organizations.
What do you think is the end goal with the approach they're taking, right? Is it like this just shutting places down doesn't make a ton of sense to me? Speaking with even the very high barrier shelter folks, it sounds like there's an obvious need for all areas, right? Like, folks who operate high barrier shelters are very thankful that there are low barrier shelters, and vice versa, right? Because there's a need for both. What's the plan? Why would they want to be shutting this down?
I don't know. I guess my best guess is that there's this lingering political motivation. Years ago, when I first started going to city council, it seemed as though the local right-wing politicians took this stance of, we're not going to do anything about homelessness because homeless people should just leave town. And I think we've seen that that is just not true.
I was going to say,
and
did
that's
that work?
not going to help anything.
Huh.
And so even though it seems like most people who are political leaders in the city now acknowledge that we need to do something regarding homelessness, the political will is it's slowly increasing, but not enough, I guess.
What about just housing in general, and how are we doing in town? What do we need? Is that another solution, or at least partial solution to this? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think of it this way, that as much as I really want to have more micro shelters like the pallet shelter, or more tiny house villages, or even like a good managed campground where everything is clean and safe and there's good bathroom facilities and services, that's not how I want people to permanently live. People should be able to be housed. And I think a lot of the time the barrier there is we don't have affordable housing. the thing is, it's really hard to build affordable housing. We build some subsidized housing, like on Park Avenue, the Jamboree building, now called the Foundation, opened recently, and it has 58 units of affordable housing. So that's awesome. And we've had other subsidized affordable housing built, but it's not enough for everybody. There are so many low-income people in Chico, and we're in a housing crisis in general, statewide. And I mean, the rents are very high. Like, if you have a family and you need to rent like a 3-bedroom house, it's usually around $2,000, maybe more a month. And so to qualify, you have to make $6,000 a month. Most people in Chico don't make $6,000 a month. Maybe a 2-income family would, but it's hard out there. So you have a lot of normal families needing to use low-income housing. And then you also have people who are completely unsheltered or at risk of being homeless also competing for that housing. We need more of it.
Imagine your children and your grandchildren hearing your story in your own voice.
I always believe in be nice, be kind, be healthy.
This is more than a video. It's a connection to bring your family closer together.
Woodrow is my grandson. When he came home from the hospital, right? He's so quiet, nobody knows they had baby.
What I wouldn't give to have my grandparents on camera, in a video.
Ever since she was little, I can tell she's very special.
And that's why we started Life All Told, to preserve your memories with a well-crafted professional video. It's the gift of a lifetime.
Initiatives like Valley's Edge, or like, and I know a little bit less about, but the Barber Yard, are these initiatives that could, would, should include affordable housing options? Has there been much of a reception to those wishes for these developments?
I would say they could and they should. And the idea that something like Valley's Edge, as it was proposed a year ago, would provide affordable housing, I think that was a myth. It just was not designed to be affordable, at least for the most part. The developers will bring up that a small section of the land as proposed would be reasonably high density, which facilitates more affordable housing than, the rest of it, which was lower density. Still, there's no guarantee that would be affordable, and that's a very small amount of it. The rest of the proposal was medium and low density, and what that looks like, even medium density zoning, for those not aware, in Chico, it's generally houses on medium-sized lots. Mm-hmm. Like I'm here in North Chico, and most of the neighborhoods over here are medium or low-density neighborhoods, and a house on a modest-sized lot tends to sell for $500,000. And most people in Chico can't afford that. Low density, larger lot, usually a larger house, you'll see them selling for $700,000 a lot of the time. And that's the type of housing that most of Valley's Edge was proposed to build. And I acknowledge that there's a need for all housing types. But when I was on the Planning Commission, we oversaw the approval of the housing element of the general plan. And in the housing element, there's the regional housing needs allocation, which is established, it's calculated by the state, and then it's in our local housing element based on what housing exists, what housing we've built, and what housing we need. And it showed that in the past decade or so, Chico has seen a lot of housing growth in above moderate income level housing. So that's the, probably $400,000 plus houses. And we have not seen enough housing built at all in the lower income housing or moderate income. That's changed a little bit since the housing element, because after the campfire, we had a lot of tax credit funds that subsidized lower income housing in our community. And we had more low income and regular income apartments built, but still, there's a need.
Yeah. What is the solution that the next Valley's Edge or the next big development that comes in, what would they have to be able to put forward to make it make sense for everybody and to have the right amount of density, high density and medium and low density, to make it for whatever they're going for, but also make it for the people who are looking in that other bracket?
Well, side note, I just spoke last night at a community forum hosted by Smart Growth Advocates and Chico City Coalition at the Women's Club, and it was recorded. I don't know when that'll be available, but so you can check out some different viewpoints at that, because we have a community with a lot of different views on the Valley's Edge proposal. Some people believe that at the edge of town, nothing else should be built. It should be entirely open space out there, and my perspective is that that would only work if, the people who own the land wanted to sell it to somebody who had a lot of money who wanted to establish a preserve. We can't, as a city, say we've decided that this thing in the general plan to build housing is no longer a spot where we're going to put housing. The voters, in a way, decided that, but that's not. The referendum didn't permanently say that this is only open space. It just turned down the proposal that we had last year for the Valley's Edge site. And so we're now essentially under threat of a lawsuit at the city, because the developers have claimed basically that their site is being downzoned, which would be a taking because it reduces their land value. And we're not allowed to do that as a city per the Housing Crisis Act, I believe it's called, which I think was a 2019 law. So point is, basically, as a city, we're going to continue seeing something with that Valley's Edge site happen. That's probably not the best way to say that.
Well, you can't really fully stop it, right? Because even if it isn't going to be one big developer's initiative, it'll happen piece by piece, right?
Yeah. The gist of it is it's not dead. We're not done with Valley's Edge. That's going to be open space forever. The fight's not over for the people who want that. And I want to see open space preserved, but I also want to see smart growth. And I acknowledge that this site is in our general plan as a place for housing and mixed use. And so, what I would like to theoretically see, assuming that this site gets developed, I have to be careful with my language because not only legal reasons, but also I'm not trying to pick any fights with my friends who want to see the site preserved. But in my capacity as a city council member, where I need to negotiate and make the things that are in the general plan happen for the most part, if this site gets developed, I believe that it needs to be transit-oriented. 20th Street needs to be a transit corridor because we already have Merriam Park there, the mall, Doe Mill, I guess Stonegate, and other things are happening there. So we need bus rapid transit on 20th Street and a good transit hub at the end where the Valley's Edge site is. And we need higher density lower down by the existing Doe Mill and Belvedere Heights neighborhoods, so that we can have lower income housing. A similar example is there's the Oak Valley subdivision just to the north, just off of Highway 32, where you might drive out that way and you see a ton of growth. I don't think that was done very well because there's just a bunch of apartments in the middle of nowhere there, and people who live in apartments are less likely to own cars and more likely to walk, and they're next to these big roads with fast vehicles, and I don't think that's super safe or well planned. But the good thing with that neighborhood is originally it was planned to be much more sprawling. And then it ended up that the developers were, I'm forgetting if they were forced into this or just allowed to, but it ended up that they were able to build the same amount of units but lower down on the property at Oak Valley. And so that facilitated higher density lots, which facilitated affordable housing. Because when we get affordable housing tax credits for building affordable housing, or when developers use those, what they're able to build is apartments. And apartments are generally not legal to be built on most lots in the city, even if theoretically, maybe you could if the lot was big enough. Most of our zoning in the city is so low density that you're only really allowed to build a house and maybe an ADU in the back on most lots. So we need to be zoning this space to allow for a mixed density of housing. And density is good because it takes up less land and leaves more open space.
You're clearly so knowledgeable about this stuff. I'm so thankful to learn all of these things from you.
And I can rant for so long about it.
Well, you are. I wouldn't even say you're ranting. I feel like you're preaching. You've have it holding court. Is that how you say it?
Perhaps.
I really like the way you're presenting this as something that is alive and ongoing, and as being something that could be judged into a way that is more beneficial for everyone. And it's almost like there are these terms that if they can tick these boxes and, convince folks that they're being earnest about it, that this is something that could move forward in a way that isn't politicized and is more of a net benefit for the community. Is that more or less what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I mean, it'll always be political.
Sure.
Growth is always political.
Life is political.
Yeah, everything is. But I think there are opportunities, and I think that I made my stance pretty clear when I was a planning commissioner, and I voted against approval of the EIR for the Valley's Edge proposal. And I spoke for about 30 minutes and kind of annoyed all the other planning commissioners, and the developers, I hope, listened to the key takeaways of my comments, that basically the reason I voted against approving the EIR, the environmental review, was because it said there are significant unavoidable impacts to greenhouse gas emissions, and we're going to ignore that because we need housing. That was the gist of the environmental review. I pointed out we had just approved the housing element. As I mentioned, it said we are underbuilding for low-income housing and moderate income, and overbuilding for above moderate income. And Valley's Edge would not build the housing types, the lower income and moderate income housing, that our housing element said we need. So I said, this statement of overriding considerations is just not true. So I said, what this could look like is a higher density transit-oriented development that would make it possible to build the lower and moderate income housing that we actually need. And other people said that. I know Councilmember Addison Winslow said that in his remarks. And previously, Butte Environmental Council had submitted comments that basically said the same thing, that if we're going to comply with our general plan in building a subdivision on this site, that it needs to include enough opportunities for mixed use and affordable housing and transit-oriented development. So that is to say that there is an opportunity here. It's going to be controversial, even if the developer comes back and says, look, we managed to make a really cool transit-oriented neighborhood. There's still going to be opposition, but less of it, because that's what would theoretically comply with our general plan. I will also note that if I could, maybe travel back in time and redo the general plan somehow, wave a magic wand, I don't think that I would be prioritizing development at the edge of town where that site is. But the reality is that that's been in the works for a long time. And I don't feel that we can say, no, nothing should happen there now. I think we just need to be smart and strategic about it.
Really, really well said. In lieu of a magic wand, here's hoping that, round 2 is a little more friendly to higher density transit forward planning. Which brings me to transportation, which is what I want to talk about next. Also, if we maybe we get a pothole update.
You want me to tell you how many potholes there are in the city?
I would love to know.
I don't know.
Okay. It's more than 100.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's still a lot. I haven't fixed that yet.
Tell me about what your vision is, what you'd like to see for transportation in Chico.
Ooh. Okay. First of all, some bus rapid transit. like I mentioned, 20th Street, that's a great opportunity. We're also going to repave, maybe redesign 20th Street at some point because it's a pretty congested corridor at times. It serves a lot of different areas of Chico, all the way from the Barber neighborhood down by Sierra Nevada Brewery in Chapman Town, crossing the highway, going to the mall, and then Merriam Park, which is still under development. Neighborhoods east like Doe Mill, and then, in the future, Stonegate, and hypothetically the subdivision proposal formerly known as Valley's Edge. So 20th Street, especially if something like Valley's Edge happens, is going to have so much congestion. We need to figure out something besides just having a lot of cars in traffic on 20th Street. And to me, that looks like bus rapid transit. And bus rapid transit, for those not familiar, is not just a bus, but it's a bus that has a special lane. Sometimes that can look like a shared, like a carpool lane. Sometimes it's a bus only lane. I'm not sure that we have, enough buses. Kind of a chicken and egg thing to deserve its own lane, but it could be like a bus and bike lane. Or the city of Eugene has a really cool bus rapid transit network, or at least one route in its bus system, where near the university in downtown, there's a bus rapid transit. The bus goes onto its own little center right of way, and it goes over this grassy, pretty area surrounded by trees, and the transit stops are all really nice. And so because they're getting the bus out of the main roadway, the bus goes faster than all the cars. And what that does is gets people places faster, and it boosts ridership because more people are like, well,
get to work
it would
on time.
actually, I could get to downtown faster than if I drove my car, which would be unheard of at this point. Right now, it's not fun to take the bus. I looked into taking the bus here for this from my house, and it would have taken at least 40 minutes, which, if I had all day, that would be fine, but I don't. So I drove.
What, how long does this stuff take? Because it certainly seems like I have memories of being like 10 years old and like trying to get out of the Toys R Us parking lot in like the back seat over, is that 20th Street? Yeah, right? Probably. Where Toys R Us used to be. It's, yeah. And
I grew up in Reading, I'll just note that, so I don't actually know.
It's needed help for so long. Mm-hmm. And how do we support actually making these changes? And I understand that so much of this is going to be, red tape and voting and long-term initiatives, but what are we allowed to hope for?
Well, we can hope for anything.
Okay.
Transit projects take a long time. Part of that can be because of environmental review. I think that, if we're talking about something on an existing city road, we can probably bypass that because let's say we're just putting a bus lane and we're just restriping the pavement and fixing the pavement issues. Like that actually should be pretty easy. We should be able to do it in the same time frame that we're planning on just repaving the road. But if it involves constructing like a center area with concrete dividers or something, that's at least going to involve a lot of engineering and constructing it. So that probably adds a couple of years. But all of that is pretty reasonable. Like we're not building a brand new high-speed rail at the edge of town or anything. Yeah. But yeah, there's the issue of the politics.
And I was going to ask about that. How is that kind of transit-oriented thinking received when you bring it to the council?
It's probably a mixed bag. I haven't really brought it to the council yet. And like many things, it depends. There is often more, again, it depends. Yeah. But in many cities, at least, there's more support for new things, like shiny new transit projects. Whereas the idea of making the Beeline buses better doesn't sound great politically. And I think there's a couple things at play there. Transit is often seen as a poor person's thing. And so unfortunately, people with less money don't have political power. And the people who do have political power often aren't really interested in making life a little easier for the people who take the bus to work or to the homeless shelter. That's seen as either just something that they don't think about at all, or sometimes in politics, transit is seen as a bad thing. I'm not going to assume that that's the case for anyone here, but there are undertones of classism in dealing with transit.
How about support? Is there any overtones?
Well, I know that I support transit. Addison Winslow does. Katie Hawley probably too. And Tom Van Overbeck supports good transportation in general. And I believe we've talked a little bit about transit, and he's been open to some ideas. But I have yet to really talk to him more about things like bus rapid transit on 20th Street. Hopefully we'll get there. And I haven't spoken with the other 3 council members about this specifically, but I think, there's a case to be made that
Sure.
better transit is better for business, for development, for a community in general. But I brought up the stigma about transit because I think it's just something we're going to have to overcome. Yeah. I think there's an inherent bias against it for some people, and I think we can get through that. But I also brought up how some people like new projects because
That's marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's kind of this idea that like, oh, well, if we put in a trolley, it's like that's not the bus because the bus is stigmatized as like that's what the homeless people use. You have to wait out at this terrible bus stop for it. But if we had like a trolley or a train, it's different. That's what business people will use. And that's just a bias. Like it's all the same. It's all just a thing that gets you places. So we can brand it as whatever. But I want to bring up, I was reading a piece by Charles Marone from Strong Towns, which if anyone seeing this hasn't checked out Strong Towns, I think you should, because it's a really great apolitical organization with a lot of good resources for especially small cities and towns to kind of rethink how they develop. And one thing that I was reading was I was curious about Chuck Marone, the founder of Strong Towns, his views on transit. And one take that he had was we really need to be, he often talks about incremental development. So it applies here. We need to be looking at how we improve the systems that we have, not putting millions of dollars into new systems. So that's one of my takes. Let's improve the B-line, and that includes maybe bus and bike lanes, better infrastructure, a transit corridor on 20th Street, things like that. So that's a priority for me.
Really, really excellent. Do you have like a gold standard of like a community that has your favorite transportation? Is it Eugene, or is it somewhere that you've looked at that you're like, oh, they're doing it right or closer to right?
I don't have like a city that I would point to and say this is just like Chico and has all the applicable things. There are elements of really good things from a lot of cities. So yeah, I pointed out the good bus rapid transit in Eugene, partly because it's a college town. And I think a lot about Davis as a good example of a bike-oriented city. And whenever I go to the Bay Area, I love taking transit in San Francisco. And I don't bring that one up as much because I think San Francisco kind of scares some people here. I don't want to be seen as some city slicker. But it is really cool that I can take the Amtrak bus and train to San Francisco. I can then take BART and Muni everywhere, and like I really don't need to have a car there. And I think
it's the only cushioned public transit in the nation.
Really?
I heard that. I don't know if that's true. I heard everywhere else they removed the cushions in the 90s so they can hose off the seats.
Okay. Well, yeah, the new BART trains have like some kind of very plasticky cushion.
Yeah. I like BART. I'm a huge BART fan.
Oh yeah, it's great.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about you as a person and what led you down this path. Why aren't you like a pro BMXer? Why? You play the accordion, is that right?
Yeah, I'm stuck on this. Why am I not a pro BMXer?
Yeah. Like you decided to be a helper for some reason, right? You weren't maybe you were from a family of pro
I'm not
BMXers.
good at sports or coordination, so that's why I'm not good at BMX.
But something like, I guess it was like more of an example of like, why this?
I know.
Right? And is this how you were raised? Is this like the opposite of how you were raised? Is this something that like struck you like a bolt of lightning out of nowhere? Or were you really the kindergartner who wanted to be president like your mom says?
Yeah, it's probably a mix of a few different things. I don't think I ever just got struck by a bolt of lightning and said, I need to run for city council. Mm-hmm. That really was just a slow falling into a rabbit hole of policy wonk stuff and then feeling like, well, I need to put this knowledge to action somewhere.
It sounds like that policy was like a lot of where you kind of cut your teeth, if that's the phrase, about how to do this kind of thing. I'm curious if you have always identified as being like an advocate, as someone who wanted to help others, or if that was where do you think that comes from, and why is it scarce?
Couple of things. I mean, I have to thank my parents for being really good, compassionate people. Like, I wouldn't say that as a family we, attended rallies or did a whole lot of volunteering or anything, but my parents definitely stressed the importance of being kind and helpful to others. And my mom signed me up for like a lot of kind of volunteer-based organizations like Girl Scouts and 4-H and things like that. So that's kind of where I, even if maybe I didn't appreciate it always at the time, I think I ended up doing a lot of volunteering, community service, and community speaking in those organizations, and that strengthened my skills at it now, even if I don't know that I really got my appreciation for it there.
It like normalized that being part of your day-to-day. Yeah, that's awesome. What did you do in 4-H?
I didn't raise animals,
but
I was in 4-H and I did a lot of like home ec type of stuff, but also like the civic or the like group leadership and public speaking, presentation types of stuff. We would I had to like put together presentations on things, and I'm sure that helped with things such as speaking at a community forum last night. And yeah.
Amazing. And so you said you grew up in Reading, so it's very close, right? North Valley. What brought you to Chico?
My first job after college, I worked for AmeriCorps for the city of Chico doing climate action, education, outreach, and data analysis. But that's not the only reason I ended up here. Growing up in Reading, it's pretty close by. So my sister went to college here. She actually moved to Oregon around the time that I moved to Chico, but I had started hanging out here because of her. And then my friends from high school, most of them moved to Chico afterwards, whether to go to Chico State or because they were in bands and their friends moved here. And so all the cool punks and stuff and metalheads kind of gravitated to Chico. And so I would come here on my breaks from college and hang out. And I was like, this is so cool. Like, everybody just walks to this big pool in the middle of town after shows and goes skinny dipping. Like, that's awesome.
It's amazing. The music scene here really is kind of special. Why is that? Why do you think? The young folks, college, good mix of it. Why is the Chico music scene so much more poppin' than Reading?
Oh, well, I was going to say it's because the rent is affordable. Reading's not more expensive. Reading is just uninteresting. Sorry, Reading. Actually, it's kind of funny. I mean, we're like similar sized cities. Reading has beautiful outdoor opportunities. It's pretty sad that Reading is not a cultural hub, to describe it in nice terms. It's probably the lack of a university in Reading, or the lack of a not religious university. Growing up, like I would go to shows at Sue's Java Cafe in high school, and then a couple people opened other little venues after that, and then there were some bars that I couldn't go to, but it wasn't that happening of a spot.
What got you into music? Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, basically not having a public university there means that there was just a lot less people moving in who are creative and have that time and motivation to be creative. I'm sure there's a lot of great creative people in Reading, but they're just working, doing all that normal stuff.
Is playing music something that you always knew you wanted to do? Did you pick up an instrument one day and say, I'm going to be in a band? Or was it something you did for yourself? How'd you get into music?
I remember when I was like 5 or so, my dad bought a nylon string guitar at a yard sale, and it wasn't like some, moment of like, oh my God, I got my hands on that guitar and I just shredded. No,
Although I would believe that.
Never shredded.
For the record.
Yeah, regrettably, I'm not a shredder.
No, she is. Disagree.
I probably started writing like sad acoustic songs at 5. No, actually, it took me a while to start doing that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I had a guitar. I took guitar lessons in school, and we had like a Casio keyboard with all the little preset do stuff.
Way too familiar.
Yeah. Had fun making whooshing sounds on the keyboard, all that. So it's just like a really fun thing to do. I've never seen music as the thing that I want to do for work. I'm not a patient person, so I could probably never be a music teacher, but I enjoyed playing with my friends in high school. I really wanted to be in a band, so I started learning bass guitar, which I already knew guitar, so it was pretty easy. All my friends were like punk rock dudes, and not blaming them for not letting me into their bands, but like that just wasn't like the automatic thing. I didn't know other girls who played music, so it kind of took me a while to really like be in punk bands. Did that in college. That was fun. It was always really bad because I'm a super busy person, so just like music has never been the priority.
Yeah. But I think that's excellent. That says a lot about your character too, right? It's like you have the thing you want to do for your career, for helping, for what your actual priorities are, but then that's something that you've kind of always known you also want to be a part of your identity. It's something that you do to find an outlet, I guess.
Yeah, to me, the balance between like policy nerd stuff and creative outlets is really important. When I was in college, so I was studying environmental science and taking a lot of classes in like physics and climate science and things like that really sometimes were a little more technical than I really wanted. And then I also took ceramics and printmaking classes, which of course made me a little more stressed out than I could have been, but I found that it was really important to also be doing creative things, and also was playing music. I played cowbell in the Humboldt State University Marching Lumberjacks, our silly scatter marching band. So I love getting to do creative things, and I don't like the way that our society expects people to do creative things as a job. I think it's awesome when people can do that and that's what they want to do. But I just want to play music with my friends, and I'm not really trying to make that my job.
It was refreshing to hear you say that, because there is like this weird pressure to make your creative thing your job, and it should just kind of be a part of who you are, and there's plenty of room to do other things.
Yeah. I would love it if my friends who are actually really good at music can make a living from it.
Yeah, same.
That would be great.
Same. What is your advice to someone maybe watching this who sees a little bit of themselves in someone like you, or conversely, your advice to a young you? How do we get involved? How do we help? What does this community need? What do you have to say to the teenager watching this and realizing maybe they could run for city council?
Well, first start showing up to city council. Anybody can attend, anybody can speak. There's business from the floor / public comment at every meeting, and you can talk about whatever city issue strikes you as important. That could be preserving our trees, homelessness, water issues, anything like that. And you can contact your city council people too. I can be kind of bad at responding to my emails because I'm busy, but I really enjoy getting to know my constituents. And I think a lot of the time we really like it when people want to talk to us and learn more. So please reach out if you want. there's also a lot of really good groups in our community that are doing work that's kind of tangential to city council. Like Butte Environmental Council does environmental advocacy. There's Smart Growth Advocates, and Chico Green City Coalition just did the public forum on growth. So a lot of groups like that have ways to get involved and be advocates, and you can meet other people who you can learn from and organize with. So it's super important. Being involved in groups like that is part of what made me feel confident that running for city council was a good idea, because I knew that I had the backing of other people in my community with shared values, and I got to meet other people that, are fun to hang out with.
Bryce, I see you. I appreciate you. I'm grateful that you live in this community, that you're helping this community where I live, where my family lives. Thank you for being a helper, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been great.